So cryptocurrencies are kind of somewhat anonymous, meaning they go outside of the financial system, but the financial system is controlled. And there's two main things that they use to control the financial system or to track it, and that's one, KYC. You might have heard that term before. The second one is AML. So KYC is something called Know Your Customer, and AML is something known as anti-money laundering. Now, these two things were put into place after the 2001 9/11 attack on the World Trade Centers. The Patriot Act was put into place. And while it was a tragic day for America being attacked and for the people that unfortunately lost their lives there, it was an even more tragic day for the rest of Americans who lost more freedoms that day than any time in all of history. And part of the freedoms that we lost were the freedom to transact our own money. Now, without the freedom to transact, we have no freedom. So if I can't pay for certain things, I have no freedom, right? So I have freedom of speech, but if I can't pay to get a phone or a computer to go on the internet or pay to build a website or print a flyer, how much freedom of speech do I have? If I have freedom of assembly, but if I can't pay to put gas in my truck to drive to the assembly or pay for food when I get to the assembly, how do I have freedom of assembly? I have freedom of religion, but if my church can't pay for a building, how do we have freedom of religion? And so it all starts with the freedom of payments, and of course they've taken that away because they regulate something, like I said, KYC, AML. So KYC means that you have to know your customer, and that means that every financial institution has to know their customer. They have to know you. What's your name? What's your address? What's your ID, etc., right? And so they've put these regulations on top of cryptocurrency. So if you want to go buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrency at Coinbase or something like that, you have to put all your information in the system, including taking a picture of your ID, uploading it, all of that. So this is done through the banking system. And again, this is new. Think about, for all of history, none of this was monitored, right? We used gold as money, obviously, for 5,000 years. We used rocks and feathers. And if I paid with gold, I used gold coins. There was no KYC. There was no databases that stored everybody's most personal information. And even when we got into the fiat monetary system, after basically gold was seized in 1933 and through 1944, even then, even through 1971, it wasn't really regulated. Now, there started to be more like Bank Secrecy Acts. So then, for example, they put in the policy where transactions of more than $10,000 needed to get that KYC, get that information. But I'll have you understand that at the time when that rule was put into place, based off of inflation, that was equivalent to about $80,000 of dollars. When today $10,000 is equivalent to, whatever, I don't know, $1,000 back then. And so they've really just clamped down on what we can do. Now, this may sound like a good idea to you, but is it really? Have you thought through the pros and cons of each one of these things to grab all the information? Now, the first thing is, to use the financial system, the global financial system, you have to be able to put your information in. You have to have the ID. You have to have the government ID and all that. You have to have permission. Now, that's a problem for people that don't have that information. Now, if you're in the United States, you might say, well, everybody has that information, right? Well, let's see. There's a whole battle going on over voting, and supposedly it's racist to ask people to show an ID to vote because supposedly black people and minorities aren't smart enough to go get an ID. I think that's racist to insinuate that they're not smart enough to get an ID. But the point is that the Democrats are so dug in on preventing any type of policy that would require you to show an ID to vote because supposedly it's racist, minorities can't get an ID. Well, if they can't get an ID, then they can't get into the financial system. Think about that for a second. So is the financial system racist? You got to look at it from both sides here. You can't have your way and eat it too, your cake and eat it too, right? Now, this is just the United States. What about the world? Now, per the UN, about half of the adults in the world today have no access to banking. Two reasons, well, mainly just one reason. They don't have permission to join. Now, either they don't have the required documents to join, or two, they're from an area that doesn't allow them to join. So, for example, you're a 15-year-old kid growing up in Iran. You created an Instagram account, you want to start a little business, but nope, you can't join the global financial system because you're in a country that doesn't allow it. And so about half the adults in the world today have no access to the financial system because of policies like this. And so we have to think about risk and reward. How many people are we helping versus how many people are we hurting? So if we take a look at this, so like KYC, know your customer, is extremely dangerous, and I would even go as far as to say it's useless. Now, the thing with money, first of all, is that money, if you lose it, it sucks. Nobody wants to lose their money. But if you lose it, you can get money back. You can earn it back. What about your identity? If you lose your identity, can you get that back? When all of your personal information is exposed and sold on the dark web, do you get that back? Of course, the answer is no. Money's replaceable. Identity is not. Once it's stolen, it's gone. Now, does it get stolen? It happens all the time. So all these companies, all these cryptocurrency exchanges, all these banks, they're all storing the know your customer information, and they get hacked all the time. Experian led to one of the largest data breaches in U.S. history, and the majority of Americans' personal information, including their social security numbers and their addresses and their mother's maiden names, were put onto the dark web. Once that gets out there, it's gone. You don't get that back. What are they capturing all this information for? So are we doing more harm than good? Think about that for a second.